Association for Consulting Expertise, and our mission is to promote our membership's professional development through education, resources, and collaborative relationships. The objectives of the association are to promote practices that demonstrate a high level of integrity and ethics, create opportunities for consultants, coaches, and solo service providers in professional and business development, provide opportunities for networking and collaboration among our members, and engage in activities that benefit economic and community development, as well as to promote the visibility of ACE and all of our members. I want to let you know about some of our upcoming programs. We'll be taking August off, but in September, we'll be back with our first program on workforce issues and how to help our clients attract employees. We'll also be holding a live networking event in September, but you'll need to stay tuned as we set the date and location in the next month or so. In October, we'll hold a program in partnership with MTI's Merck initiative on the importance of a clear scope of work. All Merck engagements will require an SOW, so this program will be timely as Merck engagements begin. In November, we'll return to workforce and focus on employee retention and the importance of intentional culture to making employees feel a part of a high-performance team. And now for our program. I'd like to welcome Kristen Graham from Giving Strong, who will present today's program, Guiding Companies to Do the Right Thing. Kristen is the founder of Giving Strong, a social impact consulting firm that helps clients put all their capital to work, financial, human, reputational, and political, for a better world. Based in North Yarmouth, clients are in Maine and across the country, ranging from public multinationals to nonprofit community investors. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you. And I actually am glad that we have a more intimate group here today. I'm happy to see some people that I know and to meet new people. So thank you for having me, Jerry. And even some of the language you were using now about intentionality and the roles that consultants have here regarding sales, leadership, really get to issues of corporate culture and values. So I think that instead of this being a 101 class, this is going to be a conversation and definitely be at a higher level given your experiences. I'm going to try to share my screen now. And I want to hit slideshow. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. So I was invited to participate in the ethics focus, and my work is largely with corporate social responsibility. So this is really a conversation about how consultants can guide their clients to do the right thing. Hope that we can learn from each other, that this is going to be engaging. I'm not monologuing, but rather hope to be provocative and hear from your experiences. Another aim is to have alignment and comfort with corporate social responsibility vernacular, with the concepts, what's the difference between CSR and ESG, for example, and really hope to empower everyone here to lead this work with your clients. So I thought we'd start with an icebreaker question, and you can answer in the chat. The question is, what is your favorite sustainable snack? From Vermont maple syrup, I'm a member of the Maine Oyster Trail, so fresh oysters, Justin's almond butter, perhaps you eat meat alternatives. Mezcal is on a sustainability marketing blitz right now, or something else. But just to get to know everybody, do you even consider, I don't know how to look at the answers in the chat though. Maybe if I do this, stop there.
I can't type, so I'm just going to say seaweed. I'll say dulse in particular.
That's a good one. Yeah, the kelp business, Atlantic Sea Farms. Oysters. Great. You can share as you want, but one of the reasons of asking this particular question is because we have to trust that if something is marketed and labeled as sustainable, that it actually is. It's a real ethical question. Are we going to get what we're paying for? We're going to get the mezcal. Mezcal's a good one. Mezcal's like a tequila, Peggy.
Okay, now I know.
Now you know. Now you can go get some. So I started Giving Strong a little over 10 years ago. Before that, I was a public relations executive. And before that, I was a journalist. And so I'm going to not answer the chat anymore and let Terry, you can flag me because I'll be distracted. So, in working as a journalist for 10 or so years, a lot of the work, especially as a State House reporter in Boston, focused on accountability, on power. It was very exciting. That was during the Weld and Cellucci administrations. I had an ethical scenario happen for me. I was also a contributor to the Howie Carr radio show. And at that time, Billy Bulger was the Speaker of the House or of the Senate in Massachusetts. And I had done my radio reporting. And when he learned that I was going to put the sound on the Howie Carr show, his arch nemesis, he had his people bring me into his office. And I was, let's just say, an early 20s novice, alone in this room. It was so intimidating with all of these men asking me to hand over my tape. And I held firm and I never handed over my tape, and I left, and I remember crying. I was just so intimidated, but that was one of my early workplace ethics scenarios. And I worked as a public relations executive and helped companies, everything from quarterly earnings reports to working with Seventh Generation, which is really an early mover pioneer in corporate social responsibility, one of the first to publish corporate social responsibility report, where they admitted that they needed to do more work. And I remember the conversation in the PR realm. We can't let you say this publicly. That's a negative, and we're all about positive. So it was a really formative experience working with Jeffrey Hollander in the crowd then. And I also had an experience with a client that wanted to market to women and decided, let's give a big donation to the Susan Komen Foundation, Breast Cancer Foundation, and then we can put pink ribbons on all of our materials and have pink stores. And when I spoke with the Susan Komen Foundation and explained the scenario, they said, you may not do that. We don't want your money. That is pink washing. And so it was the first time I learned the expression pink washing. And so a lot of those experiences really led me to start Giving Strong and counsel. It doesn't have to be businesses, they're nonprofits as well, but just to counsel others that want to deepen their social responsibility, understand it, to do so. So here are some examples of clients. Some of them are here in Maine, like Coastal Enterprises, with whom I've been working from the beginning, really. With IDEX, a year plus, we helped them stand up their corporate foundation. They never had one before. Lomlicka in Brunswick, I know somebody here is in Brunswick, had some crisis scenarios some years ago that we helped to navigate and understand how to report publicly on what was going on. CIEE is Portland-based, the world's largest student exchange nonprofit, if you didn't know that. So we had some really great experiences with them in terms of trying to diversify the student body that studies abroad. So your typical study abroad student looks like my daughter, blonde and perky, and there are fewer, just data shows people of color are not studying abroad. And one of the barriers to that is just not having a passport in the first place. So we did a passport caravan at HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities across the country, to just go directly to the students, go into community and have them sign up and get their passports. And then some others are on here as well. And I know Bobby Lamont because she came to some of my impact investing circles that I ran here in Maine for Invest for Better. Invest for Better is a movement trying to talk with women and let them know that and understand the power of their investments and that they can invest intentionally in the things that they care about and make an impact. So all of that is really interrelated. I promise I'm trying. I'm hitting the button. Okay. So also, if we could use the chat, I don't know why anybody came here, because you had nothing better to do, because you're actually interested in the topics that we're talking about, and it's all good. I just wanted to know if you'd put into the chat if you have a question that you want to cover today. I'd love to know what that is so we can address it. I can address it. The minds in the room here who are experienced can address it. So anything from tactical to strategic, let me know what we can cover as we go. So one of the things we talk about is how to avoid being the next downfall. So if you have Netflix and HBO Max, you're getting to watch some of these sort of docudramas that address companies that have been unethical. Everybody remembers the Enron story, the smartest guys in the room. You can watch that. I loved We Crashed, which is the story about WeWork. And if you haven't seen it, it's a mini series. I strongly encourage you to watch it, because as we're talking about startups, we're talking about entrepreneurs here. Everybody on this call is counseling a small business that wants to achieve greatness in some way. And this starts from inception, where the inception of WeWork, and then chronicling their discomfort, their lies, and aspirations. And it's a really great case study in what you'll do for money. And I encourage you to watch it. The Inventor is the great Theranos story, where she raised a lot of money and there was no there. So, and that other consequence of that is being sued, paying a lot of money, serving jail time. So these are all examples in real time. See. Great. I'm going to come back to some of these questions. How things are going in the wrong direction and what the red flags are, and the topic of corporate stakeholders, whether only stakeholders or more ESGs, hot potato. How to help without contributing to the divide. Thank you. Keep them coming. So a lot of times you'll see headlines every day. These headlines are all within the last month, actually more in the last 2 weeks. Ernst & Young, one of the top companies. In fact, Ernst & Young is known for releasing their reports on CSR and in being a leader. And yet, the company just paid $100 million. That little m is for million. Imagine $100 million to settle charges that their employees cheated on ethics exams. It's amazing. Their audit employees wanted to keep their licenses, and so they cheated. Credit Suisse is often in a lot of investment portfolios, major global bank, and they were just found guilty, if you look in the last 2 weeks, of money laundering for a cocaine ring. And by the way, this is a situation where there was a whistleblower at the bank. She spoke up, and there was retaliation against her for doing so. And that's pretty scary, because there were a couple of murders involved in this money laundering scheme. More locally, and this can happen in Connecticut, it can happen in Maine, it happens anywhere. This is an ethics fine to a consultant who was giving tickets and perks to Connecticut Port Authority people. This is something that anybody on this call can encounter anytime, and maybe you already have. I like that the paid for the Connecticut Port Authority employee and spouse to attend a fundraiser. So here you might think, oh, I'm giving a gift. Here are these tickets to the Chocolate Lovers Fling to benefit SARSM. And paying for that tab is a conflict of interest, and it's an ethics violation. And then one of the worst, Wells Fargo, said they would, as part of their DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy, would make a solid effort to interview, recruit, and hire more people of color. But they weren't doing that. In fact, they would go through the motions of interviews after the jobs were already given, just so that they could claim, oh, we're interviewing Black and female candidates. This is another situation of a whistleblower who came forward and was retaliated against by the company. So just setting the scene here, this is happening around us all the time. So I thought I'd give a little history lesson on CSR and ESG and what's the difference between them. Been a lot of first movers in corporate social responsibility. The reason Coca-Cola is here is in, I think it was 1964, that was the year that Martin Luther King Jr. received the Nobel Peace Prize. And he came back to Atlanta, and there was to be a celebration and a dinner. And in racist, I said Alabama, and I apologize, I meant Atlanta. In the community at that time, there was deep racism, and nobody was buying tickets. Nobody would come forward. And it was Coca-Cola's CEO and president that found that shameful. They took the lead. There were thousands of people who wound up coming to the dinner, and that was really an early statement for racial relations. Have to put Tom's of Maine here, because I don't know if any of you already know Tom. I don't know Tom and his wife, but they set out to say, we believe in the ingredients and the things we put on our body, and wanted to have a responsible company that does that. Also, Eileen Fisher, which I just bought an Eileen Fisher sundress. They actually have somebody on their staff. Her name is Amy Hall, and her job title is Director of Social Consciousness. And so it's her responsibility to look across the enterprise, across functions, and have conversations that evaluate how are we sourcing, who works for us, and everything else that touches the organization, to be that conscience. And in fact, her job title was influential at Seventh Generation, who also then followed on and had a Director of Social Consciousness. And I think it's notable to say that of all of these companies, only Patagonia is privately held right now. And they believe that's because it gives them the flexibility to stand true to their values. But Unilever is on here because Unilever acquired Ben & Jerry's. Unilever acquired Seventh Generation. And that's actually, Eileen Fisher is private, I beg your pardon. But Unilever, trying to be a purpose-driven conglomerate, acquired these companies because of their values, because of how they're living. And Ben & Jerry's is also famous for having a side letter about how they can maintain their practices and beliefs that were part of their founding mission. Tom's is owned by Colgate-Palmolive. So just to say that, again, for entrepreneurs who have a dream and are small companies, they can be built and then be bought. And the founders can make fortunes, but also influence other businesses out in the world. Then coinciding with the businesses that are coming online to be responsible is policy and regulation. And that's one of the other ways to maintain a company's truth, keep them honest. And that's why we have consequences in the headlines that we saw. So the FDA in 1906 was created so that we would not put poison in the food that was going to children, and continues to monitor our food system. The Clean Air Act and Clean Water Act in the early 1970s still are being debated in the Supreme Court right now, but they are there to make sure that we are disposing of waste properly, that we are not polluting the air we breathe and the water we drink. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act addresses things like money laundering, human trafficking. Americans with Disabilities Act, are you in an accessible workplace? Climate disclosure is something that the SEC is now starting to mandate. Maybe you've seen some headlines that publicly traded companies are now going to be required to disclose their climate pluses and minuses, impacts. And one of the reasons for that is more and more retail investors, there'll be people like us, not institutional investors, institutional investors like pension funds, foundations, college endowments, they've been tracking this reporting for some time. And now that the retail investor is getting involved, they're less sophisticated or may just not read those onion paper books that come in the mail when you have an investment. And so the SEC, in order to prevent greenwashing or to stem greenwashing and have investors understand, know what they own, is instituting these rules. Of course, there's OSHA, and there's the Community Reinvestment Act, California Transparency in Supply Chains Act, which tries to work against child labor, human trafficking. So I'm wondering, especially with OSHA, some of the folks on this call probably work with them pretty often, and you might counsel your clients on how to adhere to OSHA rules and regulations. Any questions or comments right now? I was actually thinking of you, John, when I mentioned OSHA. It sounded to me that might be the kind of, no, does not affect your consulting.
I guess you're referring to me.
Yeah.
No, I'm not that focused on OSHA, although I have experience with OSHA through manufacturing work that I did for a number of years. What I would add to your comments, if I may, is and a number of people here know that I worked for Procter & Gamble for many years, beginning in 1970. And one of the first things that is impressed upon people when they go to work for P&G, whether you're a technical engineer or a management position, or even an hourly employee in manufacturing, one of the first things to be impressed with is statements of values and demonstration of values and responsibility, particularly since it's probably the largest or one of the largest household products companies in the world. And I could state a number of examples in my experience with P&G where a number of positive things were done based on decisions around product responsibility. And one of the reasons I state that company as an example is I often hear people refer in a pejorative way to corporate. Something is corporate, and suggesting or implying corporate is bad. Well, there are a lot of good and responsible corporations out there also. You've mentioned a number of them, and I just want to add to that list. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, John.
Yeah, and I would add that on the OSHA side and also a little bit on the FDA side is when I'm doing assessments, a lot of times I'm doing this with food companies, and you get both the OSHA thing of keeping people safe and also the food safety issues that are involved with that. And I guess one of the things that I see is that it's not really intentional that when there's a violation, it's much more of a lack of knowledge for the small companies, or something got put somewhere and they just forgot about it, and then they don't see it every day because it's part of their everyday environment, and someone from the outside can walk in and say, you know, what's that barrel doing there? And you find out that it shouldn't be anywhere near there, type thing. So anyway.
Mm-hmm. Priscilla, you have a lot of OSHA experience.
I do. I work for service-based businesses, so there's a lot of, like Terry said, it's protecting people, keeping people safe. The companies I work with generally don't produce a product, so the product is the people, keeping them safe. So we sometimes have OSHA complaints, or there might have been a workplace safety injury that gets reported to OSHA. But OSHA over the years has gotten a lot better about helping the employers rather than just regulating them and fining them. So it's actually been really good working with OSHA lately. They've been providing a lot of education, and they've just been providing a lot more support. So it's been good.
I'm sure they'd love to hear that.
They're getting a little better. Yeah, over the years, it's gotten better.
That's great. So one of the things that's the forces that are coming together are the idea of the CSR, corporate social responsibility, the things that we just talked about. Are you following the rules and regulations? Do you have policies to help ensure that that barrel doesn't sit there where it doesn't belong, et cetera, et cetera. And the, I just alluded to the SEC inquiry on climate, because coinciding with this corporate behavior is impact investing and the demand for metrics. So one of the differences I talk about between CSR and ESG is CSR is corporate social responsibility. That is the company culture. That is the company purpose. It is the company behavior. ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance, is the reporting metric. So how do you, when people are asking you and investors are asking you, anybody's asking you, what's your climate footprint or what's your diversity at the company? Companies are now reporting out ESG. So ESG is output of CSR. And that's what's benchmarked, that's what's measured. And investors want to know materiality. If you have a monolithic board of directors that lacks diversity, is that material? Is that going to start to determine the future success or future risks of the company? If you are a polluter, how is that going to affect the future risks and viability of the company? So the Methodists and other churches were early impact investors, where they would take their endowments and famously divest from the sin stocks. No tobacco, no firearms, no alcohol. And then it started to shift in terms of being intentional investors. Actually, Bloomberg Terminals in the early 2000s started to publish ESG data and reports from the companies that it tracked. Domini is known for their money managers. So if you invest with Domini is managing your retirement or other investments, they will identify investments that are matching your values and maybe even going the next step and are furthering and supporting the things that you believe in. Rockefeller family in general, of course, made their fortune on oil, and now the family has divested from all of their fossil fuel holdings. Rockefeller Brothers Fund just put out an update on their endowment portfolio, which actually has been tracking with or doing better than so-called conventional investment portfolios. CalPERS is the California pension fund that is actually, and somebody asked a question about Disney, they do CEO meetings to determine their investments, very powerful investor. And they will comment on executive pay. They have been rating or divesting from companies and using their assets as position to change how the companies are operating. Just Capital, As You Sow, are organizations that are just reporting out on standards, helping to track, flagging companies that might be doing something wrong. I have the Heron Foundation here because they're a former client of ours, and they started to examine their endowment portfolio. And they said, you need to know what you own. What is the impact of my investments? Am I doing well? Am I harming anyone? Are we benefiting anyone? Are we neutral? And so that know what you own, I think, standard applies to really a lot of our work and us as individuals, not only in our client circumstances, because from there, when you take a look at what you own, you can make choices and decisions. They were alarmed to learn that one of the REITs that they had a lot of money in, when they looked at what's actually in that REIT, a REIT is a real estate investment, there was private prisons. So that shocked them because it was antithetical to their mission. So they wound up divesting from that and also talking about it. But sometimes divestment is a blunt instrument. You might find that if you want more influence, that by staying a shareholder, you can speak up and vote your proxy and get others along with you. And I just wanted to make sure this is working for everyone. Is it the right level of information? Do you already know a lot of this? I take it as okay.
Yeah, I think it's good.
Okay. So this is just looking at CSR generally, so that corporations can have a net positive influence. We talked about ethical responsibility, ensuring the organization is operating in a fair and ethical manner. See, but now I can't see my notes. Let's see. Right, and so it's the leadership that determines whether a company has a healthy or toxic workplace culture. So you have so many consultants here. Whoop, okay. Do you have ethics conversations with your clients? And you might have conversations about ethics with your clients, but you don't say, let's have a conversation about ethics. You might just be talking about sexual harassment, whistleblowers, retaliation, that kind of a thing. But are you having these conversations?
Yeah, I'd say the way that this conversation comes up a lot of times is in the initial engagement with a new client, where you talk about what is the mission of the company, and specifically asking for what's your position, what are you thinking about in terms of social responsibility, are you taking care of the environment, that type of thing, as a way of understanding where they are at the beginning. And a lot of the small companies I've worked with, actually just asking the question, they hadn't thought about it in context of the business, but they dig a little bit and they find one. They find it, oh yes, this has to be environmentally sustainable, right? So that type of thing.
This is John. Just to add to what Terry's saying, and we often have this conversation, particularly when we're looking at organizational culture, a conversation around values. And what are the things that are just non-negotiable in terms of your values? How are they articulated? And how are your values demonstrated through practices and norms and systems, et cetera? So I guess I think all of the things you're talking about here in terms of different levels of responsibility, ethical, environmental, social, economic, et cetera, are also a part of values.
Thank you. Dana.
So, this is Dana. Can I be a little provocative? I think we're all assuming that all companies aspire to these values. And I think the truth of the matter is the conversation that the Business Roundtable started about, that Milton Friedman was wrong and profit is not the only motive. That conversation is not over by a long shot. There are a lot of companies who really do believe that their only responsibility is to generate profit for their shareholders. So would you not work for a company like that? Or if you find that one of your clients would fall into that category, what would you recommend?
For you, for anybody. You didn't mean just for me. Yeah. Well, number one is to verify and to validate that your presumption is right or wrong, right? I mean, that's kind of the know what you own. And then I guess there's this kind of a big question. So do you, right? How do you actually address it, and what power do you have? And if you're, I mean, it's like being an employee and you're like, is it as much as it is as a consultant, do you resign the business?
Yeah. And I guess for myself as a consultant, I really, I mean, I'll answer my own question for me. I don't see it as my responsibility to try to convince a company to change its core values. I don't, and whether or not I think they're doing evil in the world and I can't support that, that's a separate question. And I hope I wouldn't continue an engagement with somebody I thought was doing evil in the world. But there's a middle going.
We lost you there, Dana.
Purely, conscious of the rest.
Yeah, I mean, somebody just put in the chat here that Priscilla, I think, finds that her clients share her core values, not necessarily by design, but that they're magnetized to my marketing and modalities. And I think that also can be very true. Like in my business, I'm not really pitching or have been approached by gun manufacturers. For instance, polluters. I mean, we had been previously in PR in my crisis work, and that was a really hard conversation, but a short one, which is to say it might be lucrative, but it's not ethical to work with you. And I'm thinking of a polluter in Maine, actually, where we had that conversation. But it's hard.
It's not ethical. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but would you say it's not ethical or just simply it's not a good fit? Because gun manufacturing ethicals depends on your own personal biases. So maybe it's just not a good fit, but it's not necessarily unethical what they're doing. They're manufacturing guns. So I don't want to get into an ethics discussion, but maybe it's just not a good fit for you. And I think saying it's not a good fit or I wouldn't be the right consultant for you is a perfectly fine response.
Sure.
Absolutely. And that's, I think, where it comes to aligning with your values.
Right.
The question is, what is your value? Does that business align with my values? That's right.
I just think we have to be careful in saying one thing is unethical or not ethical based on our own viewpoints and biases. Exactly. I think it's just simply, it's not a good fit. It's not a good alignment.
Right. I think the ethics question would be to compromise your values in return for some benefit, typically money.
Right.
That's the ethical part of that.
Right.
Mm-hmm. We actually were engaged to help dissolve a nonprofit because the founder was sexually harassing an employee and a funder. And the ethics conversation also came about because the employee asked for help and wasn't getting it. And so whose responsibility is it to field that? And is there a path to reconcile it? So in CSR, ethical responsibility really is the starting point, ensuring that the organization is operating in a fair and ethical manner. And then the other pieces come the ESG, environmental responsibility, going to the rules and regulations that we talked about. And then can you do beyond? What can you do that is shifting the company to be more environmentally forward? And a lot of times that work comes from convening employees, talking to all your stakeholders, and regularly returning to those metrics. Social responsibility is a lot of times working in the community, philanthropically, community partnerships. That's all measured in CSR reports. And then economic responsibility, making financial decisions with a commitment to do good. One of the questions that came up in the concert going season was an invitation by Live Nation to be a VIP. And if you're a VIP, you get to go into the special set aside lounge with your own bar, with your own bathrooms. And they're really pressing on the bathroom part. So I took a tour and I was amazed at how clean it was. And then of course noticed the custodial staff. And I just wondered, like, if I pay an extra $70 a ticket, which I didn't, by the way, to join the VIP level, who benefits from that? Is it, you know, and the people who are keeping the bathroom clean that they're selling to me, are they earning a living wage? So all of these considerations, what's a good job, pay parity, are men and women getting paid the same? How many times more is the CEO getting from the lowest paid employee? All of those questions come with economic responsibility. Just thought I'd look at the questions and see if we hit on them.
I haven't seen any new questions in there at the moment.
Well, I think also here's a good point about how regulators are perceived becomes a significant driver of culture. You know, the SEC is, as I mentioned, doing this work with the environmental reporting for companies, and companies are pushing back. It's an enormous amount of work for companies to be examining these things and to report on it. But the question is, if you're not, then what are the consequences? And is the SEC gearing up to levy fines and other penalties against businesses? So from the onset, companies are looking at the SEC as the enemy and not as the helper, and not as the partner. And I guess the only other part of it is the relationship is not a friend. The relationship is,
right.
Keep yourself in mind that this is a workplace relationship and everybody's got a job to do. The topic of corporate stakeholders, whether only shareholders or many more, has become a political hot potato. How can we help without contributing to the divide? And Dana, could you help me understand your question?
Well, you know, Disney is the latest example. Their stance on LGBTQ legislation, you know, the educational stuff in Florida got them in big trouble with the administration, and things have gone from there. So, you know, if you happen to be working with a company that is having some kind of a dispute with whomever else in their state that's affecting their well-being, but I don't even know exactly what the question is, Christine. I think we're in a moment in time where this has all become so politically divided, whether or not corporations, you know, express their ESG and multiple stakeholder values. That in itself has become a target, you know, for Republicans and for a lot of other people who, you know, favor the Milton Friedman model of things. So I think it's just a hard moment in time to be working with corporations that are taking stands one way or the other, because without getting yourself in the middle of something really, really big that we don't have much control over, but that we really don't want to contribute to the fallout.
Right. Well, and that's politics. I wasn't sure, Dana, because there's also complaints about Disney and CEO pay. And is the CEO getting paid enough while the, you know, people walking and serving concessions are getting paid minimum wage?
Well, that's another good question. Is that right? What do you do with in that case? Is that something that you would, you know, take a stance on?
Right. And those are, so that's a value. And, you know, you decide, well, I'm not going to Disney this year. I'm going to, you know, Acadia. Is it, you know, so you vote as a consumer with your pocketbook, and then You can vote if you have a proxy voice. You can write, use your reputational capital, political capital, and write an op-ed and start to galvanize people. Do you care that much?
Right.
And so that becomes a very individual thing, and that's why small private companies and organizations have the most flexibility. They also identify with the founder. So a lot of the organizations that we're working with that are small businesses have a cult of personality at the top, and then we'll say, I will come forward and make sure everyone who works for me is has an access to reproductive health. Right, that's what the statements are coming out now, and it's very political and very divisive. And yet, for a state like Texas, which has some of the strictest rules, right? Companies are moving there en masse. They're moving there for the tax benefits. They're working there for other, workforce advantages. And so that's when it becomes, I think, to Priscilla's point, is it ethical, or does it align with my values? And that's what I think that was probably the best comment. I'm going to start incorporating into my presentations, because it's the truth. What's unethical to me might be entirely appropriate for you, and it's the choice to engage. And if you choose not to, and then that is, what is that level of engagement? Is it, I'm going to make change from within? I've heard that from Darren Walker, the president of the Ford Foundation, is on the board of Pepsi Cola, and people complain to him. And he said, but this is a position of power where I can help make change from within. And then do you do a public, PR background of mine, let's take to the media and take to social media and establish a campaign. But then it becomes unethical when it is unfair, inaccurate, lying, or shaming individuals. That's not okay.
One thing I struggle with is if you're on social media, and I do not have a huge following on social media by any means, but I've been watching other people who are on social media more. It seems to be a trend that the audiences want to force your reaction on a certain hot topic. Like, what's your stance on women's rights? Or what's your stance on this or that? And sometimes the brand is not ready to respond, or maybe they know that their opinion is not necessarily going to be a popular response. And so they don't really feel like they want to put that on social media. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with, like, being on social media without having to show all your cards, because it might be off brand, it might be just something that you're just not ready to discuss
Right.
yet?
I would direct everybody to probably the least likely social media brand that I love, Steak-umm. Steak-umm, the frozen beef sheets. This social on Twitter, if you find Steak-umm on Twitter, they actually are making public comments and trying to be provocative and taking a stand on what is humanity and what makes good people and what also makes a good steak sandwich. But not everybody's ready for that. Priscilla, you're right. And one of the hardest things to do is to say nothing in some circumstances. In some circumstances, it's just best not to engage at all. I would say that if you have a statement about, you can have a statement about not participating, not being goaded into conversation. And then you have to just decide case by case, because there might be some cases where you're thinking, we can't be silent on this. We need to say something. So I guess it depends on what the challenge is. But for the brand, brands can have, sympathy. Brands can offer condolences. We did a social media recently. We just said, we're sad today, or we're exhausted. And so that's okay to do. And if you don't want to engage, it's hard to be specific here because it's a vague question, but you can just not engage, just let it go and it will go away. But sometimes social media is so ugly. And the other thing that happens is you can just bury some of these things, but I think burying is avoiding.
No, thank you. And, I think to Dana's point, it's become so volatile that honestly, I've been avoiding social media. And I don't know if that's going to come back and shoot me in the foot later, but even LinkedIn has become a place of, argument. And so it's just kind of like, well, what do you do when you're marketing, or how do you show your core values without having to argue about them?
Yeah.
Well, I think that is actually the right statement to say, I want to reaffirm our core values and then just stand by them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that simple. You're not going to be bullied into changing them. This is
Right.
where you are. And just say, let me reaffirm our core values.
Yeah. So let me jump in here. So Priscilla, I'm a little bit on social media, not that much, but I make it a practice to never, ever put anything up that is a stance on some controversial issue. And I do that because part of my identity is as a neutral. I facilitate dialogue and do mediator kinds of things. And so even if I feel very, very strongly about something, which sometimes I do, I will never put anything up about an opinion I have personally on a hot potato issue.
I follow the same as you, Dana. I post more pictures of my dogs than I do anything else, but I tend to get bullied, and people will say, well, your silence is worse than, blah, 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 or, by you staying silent. And I feel like I get bullied in some arenas where I just can't vocalize how I feel in a way that's not going to be argumentative. So I don't say anything.
I'm sorry that happens to you. And I'm sure that happens to a lot of people. And I think that's exactly one of the things that's contributing to what we've got. Absolutely. Is people are told that if they don't take a stance, they're contributing to the bad. And I think that's really not the case. I think you have to resist.
I think the world needs more neutrality, more people being neutral on issues.
More purple people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And businesses are people. Small businesses are still people, especially small businesses, right? And that's where, the founder identity is so intertwined.
Thank you. Good discussion. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a nice small group, and it was just really the share time anyway in the presentation, so perfect. I think also one of the things is just we find for my business, we're starting an engagement with a law firm, and it's just that a lot of companies, they just don't understand how to organize. This is just the classic consultant role. They're like, well, we want to do good, we're doing these things, but they don't actually understand. So you do the assessment, know what you own, what are you doing? And then from there, you can prioritize what are your values, and then organize and assign people new responsibilities or not to move ahead. So that's how we work. We have these conversations all the time. The end. And thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you, Kristen. One comment I was going to make was, and it had to do with the question I put in originally that was about how things go off the rails at companies, and how can you see that? And it seems to me that it's about incentives. A lot of times as an organization grows and you get new people in that may or may not be as aligned with what the values were. Maybe you were not effective at communicating the values when you hired someone, and then you didn't notice that you have set up an incentive for them to do things that gets you on the headlines of Ernst & Young or something like that, and it just starts the ball rolling. So I guess I'm making a statement rather than a question, but to me, there needs to be a way that each and every person in the company is onboarded to those values, to understand that, and to then create specific incentives to maintain the values as opposed to incentives that will drive you away from them.
Yes, and communications, constant communications, reminders, check-ins. How are you doing? Teams from across the organization instead of siloed. All of those means of communications and witnessing and hearing other opinions. That's what else will help keep it on the rails. And I don't think that you're really going to be able to do anything to stop a nefarious, ne'er-do-well, like somebody's intent on lying about their emissions, Volkswagen, then, they're going to do it. So, but if you're really, somebody said like corporate is not bad. Corporate is a structure. It's people who are good or bad, and the people who make up the organization, and they need to be valued and communicated with and heard.
Okay, anyone else have any other questions or comments for Kristen? Or in general? Okay, I think we're good. Thank you very much, Kristen. I really appreciate you doing this for us and leading us through this discussion. As you say, I think a smaller group, it's a more meaningful discussion than just a pitch. So I think this worked out well. Thank you very much.
Hope to see you at the Clam Festival tonight.
Festival, there we go. Everyone have a great summer, and we'll see you all in September.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank you,
having me.
Carrie.
Bye.
Good to meet you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.